It started with silence, the kind that feels too quiet in a room that used to breathe with life. In Ouagadougou's dusty outskirts, Mamadou locked his door that morning like always, unaware this day would ask him to choose between everything he believed and everything he stood to lose. He was a driver, not a hero. Worked for a man named Colonel Diarra, a man with calm eyes and hands that never shook. Loyalty wasn't a job, it was expected. And Mamadou, 4 years, gave it without question. Until one ride, one envelope, and one overheard call changed everything. A whisper in the back seat. The colonel didn't know Mamadou heard. It wasn't just money in that envelope. It was names. People marked. People Mamadou knew. And that night, while his wife stirred rice over fire, he wondered if silence had finally become too loud. His brother, Issouf, was among the names. They hadn't spoken in years, not since a market dispute split the family. But blood never forgets. Mamadou stared at the flames dancing in his small home, asking himself if he still owed a debt to someone who once turned away. Issouf had always challenged power. Now he ran a youth organization demanding answers. He lived in Bobo Dioulasso, where voices rose and sometimes disappeared. Mamadou hadn't planned to visit, but the next day, he asked for leave and started the journey anyway. The bus ride was long, packed with stories and sweat. At every checkpoint, Mamadou felt eyes linger too long. He wasn't carrying anything illegal except the weight of knowing too much. And he wasn't ready to explain that to men with rifles and no time for questions. When Issouf opened the door, the pause between them felt like years. But he let Mamadou in. They spoke little that night. Two men who once shared a bed as boys, now struggling to speak like strangers. Until Mamadou placed the envelope on the table and walked outside. The next morning, Issouf didn't ask where it came from. He only asked one thing: what now? Mamadou didn't have the answer. He had always followed orders. Never questioned the path. But now, the road had split, and neither direction promised a return. They agreed to burn it. But only after copying the names. It felt like a small rebellion, and yet it made everything heavier. By nightfall, the wind had taken the ashes, but Mamadou still felt watched. Trust is easy when no one is listening. Hard when someone always is. Back in the capital, Mamadou returned to his routine. Colonel Diarra said nothing, but his smile lingered too long, his handshake too firm. Something had changed. And Mamadou knew he hadn't been the only one listening in that car. A week passed. Then Issouf vanished. Gone without noise. His house undisturbed. His group disbanded by fear. Mamadou called. No answer. He went back to Bobo Dioulasso. The streets quieter than before. Posters of his brother were already fading in the sun. He asked questions. Got looks instead. People feared being associated. Fear is louder than facts. But one woman, Aminata, a teacher, whispered he was taken. Not by strangers. By someone in uniform. And Mamadou felt the room tilt beneath his feet. Aminata gave him a name, Captain Sorgo. He worked under Diarra. Ruthless in quiet ways. Known for making people forget things. Mamadou remembered Sorgo's cold nods, the ones that said "I see you" without speaking. Now that gaze had reached his own blood. Mamadou returned to the barracks under the guise of routine. But every corridor felt shorter. Every face familiar in a way that made him uneasy. He wasn't just a driver anymore. He was a question in a place that liked answers already written. He searched Sorgo's office while the man was out. Found nothing obvious, but behind a loose tile, a flash drive. He didn't think. He took it. Hid it in his shoe. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not for fear of being caught, but for what he might now have to do. The next day, Diarra asked to see him. The room was dark, quiet. Diarra offered tea. But didn't drink his. I trust you, he said, voice steady. I always have. Mamadou nodded, unsure if that was a promise or a warning. Or maybe both. Mamadou met Aminata again, this time in a crowded church. He passed the drive without words. She left minutes later. And as the choir rose, Mamadou felt something shift. A story had been passed. And once stories begin, they grow louder than their keepers. 2 nights later, he was followed. Not home, but to the market. 2 men in plain shirts, too quiet, too close. He didn't run. He bought oranges. Looked them in the eyes. And said, "You need anything?" They walked away. But left a silence behind. On the radio, a voice began to speak. A woman. Calm. Confident. She listed names. Dates. Connections. Things only someone close would know. Mamadou knew the voice. It was Aminata. And the story she told, it didn't spare anyone, including him. Diablo fell first. Then another captain. Investigations opened. Protesters returned. Mamadou kept driving. Eyes forward. Knowing he'd helped light a match. But now, the fire had chosen its path. And he couldn't control where it would burn. A week later, he was arrested. Not with force. Just a quiet knock, a black car, and no handcuffs. At headquarters, they offered him tea. Again. And asked one question, why? He said nothing. Not because he was guilty. But because the answer wouldn't matter. Aminata visited once. Said Issouf had been found. Alive. Broken. But alive. Mamadou wept for the first time in years. Not from sorrow, but release. Something had held tight inside him for too long. And now, it had cracked. After a month, he was freed. No charges. Just silence. He returned to his home, where his wife waited. She never asked where he had gone. She only said, "You're thinner." And for the first time, he smiled. Not because things were right, but because they were real. The colonel was gone. Transferred. Or retired. No one said. No one needed to. Power doesn't disappear. It shifts. But Mamadou understood something new. Power feared truth more than it feared rebellion. And truth had already taken root. He still drives. Still watches. But now, with eyes wide open. And sometimes, in the rearview mirror, he sees faces he thought he'd lost. His brother. Aminata. Even himself. Not as they were, but as they could be. And for him, that's enough. For now. One afternoon, a stranger left a note beneath Mamadou's windshield. 5 words, handwritten in shaky script, "They haven't stopped watching you." He looked around, but the street was still. No shadows. No movement. Only a breeze that felt too cold for midday. He burned the note. But the words clung to his memory. Every late knock, every wrong number, every flickering light at night became a reminder. Truth has no safe return. Once revealed, it stays alive. And those who carry it must never sleep too deeply. Issouf called. Voice fragile, but alive. He asked Mamadou if it was worth it. Mamadou didn't answer. They sat in silence, both knowing that worth is measured differently when you've lost time, breath, and pieces of yourself that may never come back. Aminata started a radio series, Voices from the Edge. People began to share their own stories, carefully at first, then braver. One by one, names became more than whispers. They became testimony. And for the first time, the silence began to bend. The broadcast reached far villages. Old soldiers began to talk. Retired officials sent letters, unsigned but truthful. The network was growing. Not in arms, but in voice. And Mamadou realized he had become part of something too big to step away from. Still, there was loss. A friend at the barracks, Umar, was dismissed. No explanation. Just gone. The cost of standing too close to questions. Mamadou tried to call. No answer. He stood at the gate for hours, hoping. But the gate stayed closed. Diarra's mansion stood empty now. Rumors said he fled to Ivory Coast. Another said he was under quiet house arrest in Ouagadougou. Mamadou didn't care. The man had vanished, but the shadow remained. And shadows don't retire. They wait. In the city square, murals appeared. Paintings of faces long disappeared. Symbols of justice, unfinished. One of them looked like Issouf. Mamadou saw it one morning on his way to buy bread. He stared, smiled softly, and left an orange beneath it. One night, Aminata was attacked. Not fatal. But a message. Her voice cracked on the next broadcast, yet she kept speaking. Fear wants silence. But we've all tasted silence. It doesn't save us. That line echoed across the country like thunder. The government changed. Not all at once. Not loud. But names moved, policies shifted. And though power still had teeth, it bit less openly. The streets still weren't safe. But they were learning how to breathe again. One cautious breath at a time. Mamadou kept his job. But now, he drove differently. He noticed everything. Smelled the tension in leather seats. Heard the fake laughter. Read the eyes in the rearview mirror like letters. Because once you know the game, you never unsee the rules. Issouf visited him. Thin. Quieter. But steady. They shared tea. No apologies. Just presence. And as they talked beneath the stars, Mamadou realized they didn't need to fix what was broken. They only needed to build something new beside it. Mamadou gave the flash drive back to Aminata. She smiled. It belongs to the truth now. He nodded. But deep down, he knew. Truth may belong to everyone. But the weight of carrying it was personal. And he still felt every ounce. A document surfaced. Leaked. It showed how orders had come from above Diarra. People higher. Quieter. Men who smiled for cameras. Mamadou read every line. Not with surprise, but confirmation. The sickness ran deeper. But so did the cure. An old man in a mosque told Mamadou, every country has two winds. Fear and memory. One pushes, one anchors. Which one we follow determines who we become. Mamadou held that close, knowing the hardest part wasn't fighting, but remembering why. Umar returned. Scarred. Silent. But alive. They didn't talk about what happened. But Umar placed a hand on Mamadou's shoulder. That was enough. Some wounds aren't shared in words. Only in the way two people choose to carry together. In the village where Mamadou was born, a road was named after a local teacher who once disappeared. His mother called to tell him. You remember Miss Kuda? He did. She taught him to write. Her name now paved a path forward. A small justice. The driver's seat still smelled like leather. But now, it felt like more than a job. It felt like a witness box. Every mile, every passenger, another page. And Mamadou knew some truths are best told from the quietest corners of a loud world. On the anniversary of Issouf's return, they planted a tree in Bobo Dioulasso. No plaque. No speech. Just hands in soil. Roots reaching where words couldn't. Some stories don't need to be retold. They need to be grown. Aminata was nominated for an award. She declined. Said it wasn't hers alone. Said the voices on her program were the real heroes. Mamadou smiled when he heard it on the radio. Not because he agreed. But because she still believed. He drove a diplomat once. Foreign. Curious. Asked, "Is your country safe?" Mamadou paused. Then said, "Safe? No. Not always. But it's awake now. And that matters." The diplomat nodded. Then stared out the window, silent the rest of the ride. Late one night, Mamadou stood alone outside the old barracks. He traced the gate with his hand. Memory is a heavy thing. But he didn't flinch. He just whispered to no one, "I didn't run. And I didn't forget." Then he walked away. In the city's new school, a classroom wall bears a quote, "Silence is not peace." No one claims the words. But everyone knows who inspired them. Children read it daily. Some ask what it means. And every teacher has their own way of answering. There are still stories that won't be told. Doors that won't open. Names that stay unspoken. But Mamadou accepts that now. Change isn't thunder. It's rain. Quiet. Slow. Unstoppable. And maybe that's enough. Mamadou drives at dawn. The sky above Ouagadougou still holds dust. But it also holds light. In the rearview mirror, he sees the road he's left behind. Ahead, something new. Unwritten. And for the first time, he doesn't